I'll tell you what, a lot of people don't know this. I'll give you some under the hood news. We owed a ton of money to the US government. It came out to like $28 million we borrowed to help us get through the pandemic. And last year, around July, we were up against the wall. The pandemic was tough. We got shut down. We couldn't put on events. On top of it, Wall Street Journal calls and they're going to write a cover story in their bankruptcy section how Joe's a deadbeat and can't pay his bills. And that's a tough moment, right? Like here you are pounding your chest. You change all these lives. This is the greatest business ever. And, behind the scenes, nobody knows you're having a tough time. Like this is going to be tough. Nobody's going to want to buy a ticket. This is our death knell. I should probably raise the white flag. No one's going to think any worse of me because every event company in the world went out of business during the like I could dust off. And I thought to myself, that's what a regular person would do. A regular person would pack it in, right? A regular person would be able to justify it. A regular person would have excuses. And I thought, well, I just got to fight through somehow. We have to fight through.
Joe Sena is the founder and CEO of Spartan and creator of the Spartan race and the infamous death race. After he created a hugely successful Wall Street trading firm, Joe left finance behind in 2001 to build a new life and a new business from a farm in rural Vermont. His goal was to change 100 million lives through experiences like those he had competing in Ironman's 300-mile runs and adventure races around the world. Joe has succeeded in creating a lot of success, a lot of wealth, and a lot of transformation in the lives of the people who participate in the events that Spartan puts on in the US and around the world. And there is much more to the story than meets the eye. In this interview, for the first time, Joe shares about the financial catastrophe the Spartan organization faced during the pandemic, the brushes with death he has had in his sporting endeavors, why he continually seeks new challenges, and how he deals with one of the most difficult and pressing challenges in the human experience, getting someone to use the off button on a phone. Thank you to my friend Randy Hetrick, the former Navy SEAL and founder and chairman of the human performance company TRX, and now founder and CEO of Outfit, a previous guest here on Choose the Hard Way. You can find that show in the archives. Thanks, Randy, for connecting me to Joe to make this interview happen. You can learn more about Joe and Spartan Race at joedesena.com and at Spartan on social. Choose the Hard Way is a podcast about how doing hard things is fun and builds stronger humans. If you haven't done this already, now would be a great time to help me help you. To do that, just hit subscribe and rate the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and share this episode with someone you care about.
I moved to a farm in 2001, Vermont. Pretty rugged environment, pretty rugged place. Weather was tough. Met my wife, had some kids, got some goats, chickens, Scottish Highlander cows. We had a chopping wood contest every night to heat the house. I mean, awesome 15-year run on that farm. Coming out of the pandemic, I couldn't get anybody to come back into the office. I shouldn't say that. I couldn't get 90% of the people come back into the office who had moved to Maine, who was working from a boat, who doesn't want to deal with traffic anymore. And I was losing my mind because we have at least in my own mind, we have a very complicated business. We had just this weekend alone, we had 47 events taking place at the same time. So there is huge benefit to the organization to just walking over and seeing somebody and talking to them and say, hey, what about this? To try to find people on Zoom while they're going to take care of their laundry or dentist or dogs or whatever. It becomes very hard. We're not in the software business where we're a bunch of programmers that can work anytime. So I was talking to a friend of mine in New York City with a very large company one day. I was losing my mind, and he said, I get it. He goes, I have 85,000 square feet in the new trade center. I have nobody in the office. He said, what's funny is I have another business in Indianapolis, and those people never stop coming into the office. They bring their lunchbox every day. They never stop coming during COVID, the whole thing. And so I jumped on a plane the next day. I went to Indianapolis, and I fell in love with it. I was like, oh, this is unbelievable. So I said, we're moving to Indianapolis. I'm going to open up an office next week in Indiana. Literally, that's the way I
Okay.
roll. And we're going to Indianapolis. And I told my wife, start looking for schools. There's an old Coca-Cola bottling plant they're revitalizing. Angie's
Yeah.
List is there, salesforce.com. We're going to Indianapolis. And my buddy owns Saks Fifth Avenue. And I was telling him, and he goes, you're an idiot. I go, what do you mean? He goes, your wife's not going to Indianapolis. Like, it's just not going to work. You have to find another place. And I remembered down in Orlando, which I would never in my life, you said to me, no chance I'm moving to Florida, let alone Orlando. But I remembered there was this wrestling program down here that was like number 2 in the country. My boys wrestle, our girls play soccer. And then I knew this guy that owned 20,000 acres of land right next to the Orlando airport where I'm sitting right now talking to you. And I came down, and the wrestling coach let me go into the wrestling room at 5 a.m. and work out by myself. And I looked at this 10,000 square foot room, and all these banners were hanging, all these champions, state champ. And I thought, wow, we are way out of our league here. My boys are not at this level. And I sat there on the Airdyne bike, and I started sweating, and I was alone, and I was thinking, and I was nervous, and I was like, I'm going to move to Orlando. And I said, we got to go to Orlando because I'm nervous, because it's too hard, because it's too disruptive, it's too crazy. So we're doing it. So we made the decision that day, and I've been down here now 2 years.
Wow. And here I was. I mean, I felt like I was current on the Joe DeSena story, but clearly I'm not, because I am one of those people who moved to Maine during the pandemic because my wife grew up here. So I'm in Midcoast, Maine. I'm in Hope near Camden.
Nice.
And I was, kind of the main thing I was hoping to get out of this conversation, Joe, was some advice on undercoating my car. Do I do it? Do I not do it? Is it a scam? Like, what do you think?
We did it. Everyone, we still have the farm, by the way, and we go up there a lot. And anybody listening is welcome to go use the farm anytime they want. We love the farm. We always got our cars undercoated. You know what was awesome about Vermont and this car dealership was I would call my friend with this car dealership in Rutland, Vermont, and I would say, "Hey, I need a new vehicle, but I don't have time to go and look and fill out form. I'm not one of those guys." And he would literally just say, "Come get one. We'll figure out the paperwork later." And he would just give me a car. And he would undercoat it, and you have to do it. There's a lot of salt up by you and in Vermont, so you got to do it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. I guess it's time to get started. So, since you've been down in Orlando, has it been smooth sailing?
I'll tell you what. A lot of people don't know this. I'll give you some under the hood news. So. We owed a ton of money to the U.S. government to help us get through the pandemic. We borrowed something called the Main Street Lending Program. It was a program that ran for 2,500 businesses across the country. It was a big number. It came out to like $28 million we borrowed to help us get through the pandemic. And last year around July, we were up against the wall. The pandemic was tough. We got shut down. We couldn't put on events, but actually the re-entry was worse because when we had to sign all those deals for all those venues around the world, and we had to get insurance for all those events around the world, and we had to bring all those employees back and all those trucks, all those things, all those checks had to be written before any money was coming back in. So it was enormous pressure on us financially. And we found ourselves in a situation last July while I was here in Orlando where we couldn't continue. Like we had no money. I couldn't pay my bills. Races were filling up. That was fine. But the pressure, the amount of finances required to lift this thing from the grave back to its original luster was incredibly expensive. And the government loan we had taken would not allow us to go borrow anymore, to go raise any more capital. So my back was against the wall. On top of it, Wall Street Journal calls, and they're going to write a cover story in their bankruptcy section, how Joe's a deadbeat and can't pay his bills. And that's a tough moment, right? Like, here you are pounding your chest, you change all these lives. This is the greatest business ever. And, behind the scenes, nobody knows you're having a tough time. We got to deal with this loan. But then out front, cover the pay. Like, this is going to be tough. Nobody's going to want to buy a ticket. This is our death knell. I should probably raise the white flag. No one's going to think any worse of me because every event company in the world went out of business during the like. I could dust off. And I thought to myself, that's what a regular person would do. A regular person would pack it in, right? A regular person would be able to justify it. A regular person would have excuses. And I thought, well, I just got to fight through somehow. We have to fight through. And so I went online. Nobody knows this. I went online and I looked up the Federal Reserve, and there was a phone number. And I called the Federal Reserve and they answered the phone. And I went into a 211-day back and forth discussion. And I got to a place where they would work with us 211 days, every day, not knowing when I woke up if we were going to exist anymore. 211. Think about that, right? And thank God I had made the decision to come to Orlando and come to this place called Lake Nona, because the family that owns Lake Nona, I became friendly with during those 211 days. They're extremely wealthy. They are great people. And they go, we got you. You work this out with the Federal Reserve. We got you. We'll write the check, whatever you need. And they took care of it on a handshake. And if I wasn't here, that wouldn't have happened. So, you make these rash, quick decisions in the wrestling room. I'm going to move to Orlando, but maybe there is some universal law or so. I don't know how. Yeah, it worked.
When you were in the middle of, actually, not when you were in the middle of that, when you were at the beginning of that and you were trying to figure out what is our next move? Do we go forward? Do we wrap it up? But how did you feel, and what was that like for your family?
I don't think my family felt it as much as I felt it. I don't bring that home.
How
So
do you not bring it home?
I should restate that. I bring it home in that I'm definitely not the happy-go-lucky guy that the world sees. Right? When I come
Right.
home, I don't want to talk about it. Leave me alone. I'd rather talk about wrestling or anything other than what I'm dealing with at war all day. And I don't think I do try to leak certain things out to the kids because I want them to know that life's not easy, business isn't easy, somebody's not there with a safety net at all times. So but I don't think they understand the true impact in those moments, nor do I think my wife understands it, because we've been together 23 years and it always works out every day. So when it's always working out every day for 23 years, I don't think you could really understand how close we are to the edge at times. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it completely makes sense. Did you have the feeling that you were going to find some way for it to work out? And did you embrace the difficulty that you were facing? Or did it feel intensely stressful? And did you feel confused about how you might get to the end of it?
I remember we had to do a call with our board of directors, and a few of the board members are close friends. One of them is a very large company, Hearst Media, which is around 100 plus years, and they own a piece of ESPN. And really, when you get that close to the edge, I mean, it was literally like Sylvester Stallone hanging with one hand from from the cliff. The board, usually your board has an obligation to make a decision that says, hey, you're going to have to go into Chapter 11 because you got to protect us, the board members, you've got to protect your employees, etc. And it was within days, maybe 48 hours. And I said, hang on, I've got one more call to make. I think, we could, I don't know. I remember that day. I remember where I was. I remember walking around. But I'm a pretty optimistic person, even though it was bleak, even though I had a knot in my stomach for 211 days. I don't think I think the worst day was the day the Wall Street Journal called, because then your ego's involved, right? Then you're getting punched in the nose publicly. But, and by the way, it's not to say that during those 211 days, I didn't have a pit in my stomach, it was hard to sleep, all that was going on. But I don't think I ever thought we wouldn't figure it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. You just didn't know how.
I just didn't know how. And it became really hard when those two things I just described happened. It became really hard when your board, who again, members of the board are my friends, are suggesting you just throw in the towel. And then it became really hard when the Wall Street Journal wrote that article, because then the public is basically saying, not only should you throw in the towel, you're dead. You're dead. You just don't know it.
Right. Yeah, and Joe, you've been around, you've been in business for a very long time, and I'm sure that you understood why the board needed to have that position. Did that impact your relationships with your friends who were on the board, or was that just business?
It was just business, and I understood it, and I knew if there was a different possibility, they would have said it, but I just said, give me a few more days. I've got a couple of conversations going on. And when this family, who I don't know my whole life, I only know since I moved here, when this family basically shook my hand and said, "Don't worry about it, we got you." That again was a testament that the work we do, the lives we change, like it has to be somebody that's seen what we do. If you've seen, I was at a race in Killington, Vermont, of ours 2 weeks ago, and I was at the finish line. I built this thing called the extra mile. Everybody in my team said it was stupid. Nobody wants to come across the finish line and then do an extra mile. And I said, but that's what we're teaching the world, is to go the extra mile in life. So why wouldn't we express that in an actual extra mile? And by the way, maybe sometimes we make it 4 miles because you just don't know in life, right? Maybe sometimes make it a half a mile. You get a little bonus. And so I had this extra mile, which was straight up the mountain. You just came across this race that might have taken you 6 hours. I did it. I came across the, I did not want to do the extra mile, but I had to do it. And I stood there and I coerced people into doing this extra mile. And this woman just breaks down and starts crying. And I said, "What's up?" She said, I went through breast cancer. And I just want you to know, Spartan gave me the strength to get through breast cancer. I may not be as fast as I used to be, but I'm still here and I'm still fighting through. And I got teary eyed. And so anybody out there that leans in and helps us, they understand the impact that this business has on people. And it sounds crazy, but it's a different impact than a marathon or a 5K or an Ironman. There's something about the dirt, the mud, the craziness of it, the obstacles that really strengthens your character.
There's something to what you just described too, this idea of, in certain athletic contexts, particularly whether it's wrestling, mixed martial arts, the round's going to end. In most competitions, there are other formats where it doesn't, right? And it just goes on. A marathon's going to be 26.2 miles. An Ironman's going to be an Ironman distance. But when it starts to be that variable stimulus, that's when interesting things really start to happen, it seems like.
And isn't that funny? That's business, right? That's life, right? I did an Ironman years ago in Lake Placid. It was pouring rain, and half the field quit. The rain was so ridiculous. And I was so upset with that, because I said, it doesn't say Ironman unless it's raining. It says Ironman. Like, I don't understand what, like, and that's really when I started thinking about putting on these events all over the world that would turn your life upside down. Like, imagine coming out of the swim in an Ironman and you had no bike seat. You got to bike it anyway. You got no bike seat. That's the deal. And that's really the stimulus for who we are and what we stand for. Thus, this new idea of the extra mile.
How do you bring that concept into your daily practice or your training?
Well, it's funny. I shouldn't do what I'm about to describe, but I'll tell you how I actually live my life with training is I get on kicks, shrieks, let's call them, and I just do the same thing every day for long periods of time, probably 3 years, 1,000 days. I don't check it off on a calendar that way, but when I think back to these streaks I've had, it's usually lasts about 3 years. So whether it's carrying a kettlebell everywhere I went or doing 300 burpees every single day, my latest kick, because of the facilities I have right next to the house, is I'll do a run, 2 miles, 3.5 miles. I'll get in, into the gym, the wrestling gym. I'll do 10 rounds of push-ups, pull-ups, and then I'll knock out 300 calories on the Airdyne bike. And I just do it every day. It takes me an hour, a little less than an hour, a little more than an hour. And then what I do, something I believe in is, and this is to your question, the answer to your question, is on the sixth day, Saturday or Sunday, on the sixth day, that's the crazy day. That's the day where you turn your life upside down. And that's less about repetition. It's just time on legs. Like, all right, we're just going to go out and do something that's just crazy, uncomfortable. Could be 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever. But we're going to get up at 4 a.m, 3 a.m, and just sweat until we can't see straight.
That's phenomenal. And, at this point, you've been doing this for a long time, these physical practices. What makes you the most uncomfortable?
I remember for those 15 years when I lived every day on the farm, terrible weather. I can go out in a t-shirt, no problem. So it wasn't the cold that bothered me. If I had to choose, I'd choose cold over hot. I think the thing that drives me nuts is the same thing that drives everybody nuts, is not knowing the finish line. When all right, I just have to do this. If I just get there, it's done. I get my that's easy to deal with. But when you don't know, when you wake up every morning and the Federal Reserve is not giving you an answer and you don't know if you're going to be able to secure this financing or not, and you're in limbo, that's a hard place to live. So I think just like everybody else, that drives me nuts. But I've learned to deal with it better than most, deal with the uncertainty better than most.
How do you think you've done that?
Maybe I fooled myself. I tricked myself into landing on my feet so many times in business over the last 40 years that I'm convinced it's going to be okay. And if you say that enough, you're probably influencing the outcome. If that makes sense. It could also be to your detriment, because just because I successfully climb Mount Everest doesn't mean I can go climb K2.
Yeah, definitely not.
Right?
Yeah.
So you gotta also keep it real. But I think I've landed on my feet so much. The other huge advantage I have over most people is I have ADD. And so if something's upsetting me, my brain forgets it pretty quickly and I'm on to something else. I don't dwell on things.
That's interesting. I was thinking about this when I was, I've been following your career for a long time. Most people are familiar with your origin story. And something that I've observed with ultra endurance athletes in particular, and I'm sure you've seen this too, there's often this high correlation between, not for everyone, but there's often people have some kind of addictive behavior in one area of their life that's not benefiting them. And then there's a transferal over into endurance sports, which also can completely become an addiction, which also can become relationally destructive to your friends and family if you take it too far and you're not nourishing the people around you. But it also can become a very healthy expression of something that kind of destroys or can destroy people. And, you've been around the best in the game. What have you observed in relation to that?
In relation to those that are doing crazy things in endurance?
Yeah. Like what's
So
driving them? Like usually there's something going on that's enabling people to redirect a force that might be really destructive into the direction of very high achievement. And it's not just ultra endurance, it's everything, right?
yeah, first off, I would say ultra endurance is easy. And I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of people out there that get pissed off when I say this, but I, I used to equate somebody that could do really unbelievable things in endurance with being great human beings across every part of their life. And what I found was that's not true. A lot of them, most of them, want to go and play and have fun out there. It is fun. I'd prefer every day to be on that mountain at Killington, running up and down. it's like being an endurance hippie. But when you have to come back to the office and sit and type emails and manage people, like that's not as much fun. It's really fun to date a woman or a guy, but then when you're married, you have children, you have responsibility, and you got to take out like that's not as much fun as dating. So I don't know what drives the person to do these crazy things, but like they're fun. They're fun. They're a way to escape whatever it is you're dealing with. When you get to a place where you just want water, food, and shelter, you're running across Death Valley or biking across the United States, whatever the thing is, like it's a pretty relaxed, like you don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about your mortgage. You don't have to worry about anything. Just put one foot in front of the other and go on. And we've shown that our species, these people, us, we can do anything we put our mind to physically. Climb mountains, deal with the frost, run across a desert. We can do all that. And you don't really have to you don't get in your head that much. I mean, I love Goggins. I love these guys. They're inspiring a lot of people, but like, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. Just start rowing. Before you know it, you get to the other side of the Atlantic. But if you don't have to deal with anything else, but when you got to deal with everything else, it's a shit show. Does that make sense or no?
Oh yeah, completely. It completely makes sense. And you know, I've been involved in endurance sports at this point for I don't know 35 plus years, and it brings me a lot of joy. Like you said, there's an escapist aspect to it. It's a way of processing other things, and also at a certain point, there's the saying, when you get the message, hang up the phone. Like you get what you're going to get out of it, and it is good to kind of recharge the battery. There's relational health aspects to it, but yeah, I agree with you. Society and culture kind of put this suffering and endurance sports up on a pedestal, and I think about a lot of other aspects of life that you just described, or people who aren't choosing what kind of adversity they're going to face in their day and maybe don't have access to food, shelter, water, all the things that most people take completely for granted. And that's truly hard, right? Yeah, me going on a bike ride is the easiest part of my day. It's the most fun part of my day, typically.
I'm with you, and sometimes I think about those soldiers, on the Ukrainian front line or the Russian front line, or on either side. That is tough work. Think about Vietnam. Ridiculous, right? Like World War II, like it's pretty damn easy to get on your bike.
Yeah, it definitely is. I haven't talked about it a lot on this podcast, but my dad was in Vietnam. He was drafted, and I've said something that I do every time I see my parents, or I try to do every time I see them. I get the podcasting equipment out, I sit down, and I record with them. I just ask them some of the questions that, now that I'm an adult, I've kind of always wanted to ask them. And that's one of the things I've talked to my dad about, which I'm going to keep private, but it definitely has put some things into perspective for me about the relative difficulty of what I'm doing in life and the autonomy and freedom that I have when I wake up in the morning and kind of get to choose, what am I going to make happen today, right?
Yeah, we have big problems when we're deciding which bike to get on.
That's definitely the case. Yeah, Joe, again, people are, so much of your story is out there in the public domain. One aspect of it I was not familiar with was, I was reading about this time that you were stranded in the Quebec wilderness, and how that helped you kind of discover this distinction between difficult and desperate. And when I read that, I knew I needed to talk to you about it. So what was going on when that happened, and how do you define that distinction?
I trained so well for that race. I I checked myself into a hotel in Vail, Colorado for 10 days. And every morning I got up around 3 or 3:30, 4 in the morning, carried 60 or 70 pounds on my back, snowshoed up to the top of Vail twice a day, and did 3 to 4 hours of cross country skiing every day for 10 days. I ate super clean. I had salad with tuna fish. I was like a monk for those 10 days. 10 days after the completion of that training, I ended up in Quebec. and we were going to go do this event called the Yucatec. It was going to be a quick one. Me and a team of 3 others, so we were a team of 4, 3 men and a female. Or maybe it was 2 men and a female. It was 3 of us and a female, and we were going to go knock it off. We were going to win it. Super easy. I was told I was the least sophisticated in the group. The other 3 members of the team had been doing this for 20 years. They knew what they were doing. My skis still had stickers on them, price tags. And we go out. The first part of this challenge was to cross the St. Lawrence River. It's January. There are chunks of ice going across the river the size of Volkswagens, buses. They tell us we've got to put crampons on, and we've got to be able to push. We got to have outriggers on our boat, on our canoe, because we're going to get smashed into by these giant chunks of ice, and we're going to have to sled across them and use our spikes in our shoes. So we're going to be falling in the water, out of the water, and get across this raging St. Lawrence River. We get across that. It's ice cold, obviously, outside. We get on our bikes. We bike, 80, 90 miles on our bikes. And now we're on foot and we're snowshoeing for a couple of days. I'm completely hallucinating. I'm seeing my grandparents in snow figures. And I keep thinking to myself, why are they here? I'm hallucinating that richly. We work our way to the top of a mountain, and the next section is to rappel off this mountain, call it 1,800 feet of this rock face. The team in front of us, we're in second place. The team in front of us, very sophisticated team, lots of knowledge. They felt the ropes were loose on their way down, 200 or 300 feet down into this descent. They were able to break, and they were now stuck on the face of this mountain. So we were held up on the top with no coverage, completely exposed, 2 a.m, freezing, because we'd been sweating for all these hours, and we don't have gear because in these kinds of races you can't carry too much. Our tent that was mandatory to carry, we cut in half to save weight. Not supposed to do that, so we have no real coverage, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally we get the bright idea, while they're stuck on the side of the mountain and the organizers are trying to figure out how to get them to safety, we're going to take off and try to beat them to the bottom by foot. Rather than go down the same way we came up, we hang a left turn, unbroken, no trail. We're just going to go as fast as we can down these 1,800 feet in 10, 12 foot deep piles of snow. What we don't realize is that just a little bit to the left and just a little bit to the right are these sheer rock faces, death on either side. So anyway, we are rolling down this mountain, banging into things, hanging from cliffs, and we found ourselves in a pretty precarious situation where it didn't look good. It didn't look like we could get down. We finally got down, but that day we were gonna bypass and get that day we spent on the side of the mountain, which was 15 hours more than we planned. I got to meet myself. I got to find out who I was, what scared me, what I wanted to do with my life, and that was the impetus really for starting this business. When you're cold, tired, hungry, and it doesn't look like there's any way out, that's where transformation takes place. It doesn't take place on the couch watching Netflix.
Once you had that realization, what changed for you?
My whole life up to that point, I was chasing money. I wanted to make money. I wanted to find out if I was tough enough. I had all these things that society had taught me, my upbringing had taught me were important. But at that moment, when you get to the edge, you just start thinking differently. And I just thought, I want to make an impact. I want to, the good things that I just experienced, the good stuff, I want to share with the world. There's so many people that'll never feel this, that'll never do this. And it's probably too much for most what I'm in the middle of here, but there's some appetizer that we could give them that's like this, that might spark a change in people's lives. And then you get that woman and hundreds of thousands of them that say, hey, you got me through breast cancer. Or I had this firefighter veteran come up to me one day and say, hey, I just want you to know. He hugged me, he started crying. I said, what's up? He said, I was going to kill myself. He goes, I had the gun. I had it loaded. But I remembered I had a Spartan race next week. And I said, I'll wait till after the Spartan race. You saved my life. And so I said, well, just so you know, you now have a Spartan race the rest of your life. Every weekend, like you are on my schedule. So you're not going down on our watch. But we get that all day long. And that really came from that moment in northern Quebec, where it was really cold. Really cold.
When you were in the middle of that, were there moments when it felt truly life and death, or were you confident you were going to get off the mountain?
No, it was actually a different moment that felt life and death. We put on our cross country skis, and we started to ski, and we had no experience with wax, and the skis just kept sliding. And this is going to sound silly. Nobody's really going to understand this, but we couldn't make any progress forward. We couldn't make any progress back. So naturally, what you would suggest is you take your skis off. And so you take your skis off, and all of a sudden you fall into waist deep snow, and you're not making any progress in this waist deep snow. You can't even move. So there were hours where we were there, and my teammate had just gotten back from Everest, just summited Everest, Adrian. And he turns to us and he says, this is a very serious situation. And I thought, if he's saying this is a very serious situation, we are fucked. Yeah. We are fucked. and we were not laughing about it. It was not like laughing at. We were stuck. We couldn't move forward. We couldn't move backward. Imagine like a turtle on its back.
How'd you get out of that situation?
When as 4, 5, 6 hours passed, the temperature changed. And when the temperature changed, the skis started to stick. We didn't know that. So we got lucky.
So now, you're this guy, you're bringing these experiences to hundreds of thousands of people around the world. You've got all of these events going on. The business is kicking. What does it for you? What brings these challenges for you into your life now? And is there someone else or some other force that's capable of putting you in these situations at this point where you're not in control?
The funny thing is, my life is turned upside down every single day. Anybody running a business knows that it's a nightmare. Somebody said to me recently, who does the best at your death race? And I said, it's not the military. It's really business people. Any entrepreneur that keeps themselves fit, they're hard to compete with because the business is that hard. So I'm getting my thrill every day in business, especially still coming out of COVID. But I say to people all the time, if you're going out to run 10 miles, the first 80% is easy. If you're going to run 100 miles, the first 80% is easy. You're going to 1,000 miles, the first 800. It's an 80% rule. And so I can get myself to the brink. Doing Killington last weekend was tough. It was tough. If it was 5 times that, 80% of it would have been easy and the last 20% would have been tough. So there's something in your mind that gets you to 80 and then the wheels fall off. That make sense?
Yeah. What is it about that 20%, do you think?
When I did my first marathon many, many years ago, I got to the finish line and I collapsed 26.2 miles. And I remember thinking, why did I collapse here? Why didn't I collapse at 25 or 32? Like, why? I ran 300 miles straight once. I ran from New York City to Vermont. Same thing applied. 80% of the way, breeze, like easy. That last 20% was a nightmare. But when my brain saw my house in Vermont at mile 300, my brain saw the house, my legs exploded. I couldn't take another step. So subconsciously, the brain is looking for that finish, right? The brain is like has been trying to shut down for 300 miles. Please stop doing this. You're expending too much energy. This is too dangerous. But it allows you to go like 80% of the way. And then it's begging you, it's putting brakes on it, it's trying to stop you. And then when it sees the finish line, it's not even a conscious decision. Your brain is doing that. By the way, the brain in the morning when you go to work out or you go to do anything, like the brain is trying to get you to not do it. Don't do it. It'd be so much easier to stay in bed. Why are you doing this?
Every day for
Every day.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Joe, listening to you talk about running 300 miles from New York to Vermont and the other things that you've described, what do you think it's like to work for you?
Well, look,
When you know your boss can can push himself that hard, and how do you think about managing people knowing that about yourself?
look, I don't like to manage people. I never have liked to manage people. The people that I've done best with in my life are self-motivated. They just get it done. I'm really good at creating a vision. I'm really good at motivating, but I don't want to check up on you. I've got bigger things to do I leave that to other people. When I was building my first business as a kid, I burned through 50, 60 potential employees. They lasted a day, 2 days, including my own family. And then I stumbled upon two kids from Poland in the 80s, right? They came over before the wall was down. I didn't have to manage these kids. They showed up for work an hour before we were supposed to start work. They stayed an extra hour. There was nothing I could say that would break these guys, nothing. They wanted 8 days a week, not 7. They were so happy to have jobs. They were so easy to manage because I didn't have to manage them. When I went to Wall Street, I built a firm on Wall Street. Most of those kids I didn't have to manage. They wanted to make money. They showed up early. They did the work they had to do. They hustled. So, it's a weakness of mine. That is not my area. I'm not interested in it. I don't want to sit around and check on you and see that you're doing the work you're supposed to do. Now we're lucky. We're 20 something years into this. We've assembled a team that can do it on their own. They don't have to be babysat. So I don't know if I answered the question well, but yeah, there are much better people than me that probably have MBAs and know how to manage people. But I'm more of a vision guy, a mission guy. I want to change 100 million lives. I want to get out there. I want to add things like the extra mile. That's what I want to do.
Did you always know that about yourself in business?
I have a recurring dream. I've had a recurring dream for 50 years. And the dream is basically I can't move fast enough. Something is like strapping my arms down. I want to do more, but I can't get more done. And so I think very early on in business, I realized I just want to do more. And for me to be able to do more, I just need people around me that could manage themselves, buy into the vision. This is what we're doing. Be accountable to yourself. Like, don't have me watch over you. Just get the job done. Wall Street had a lot of negatives to it, but one of the big positives was that people that survive there, people that get hired there, you're either good at it or you're not. And if you're not, you're out. So you don't really have to manage folks. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, completely. So, I mean, it must be slightly different now, though.
It's much more complex. I have a great team that survives all kinds of crap. I mean, we wake up in the morning, we don't know what's coming at us. Oh my God, 300 people in California had some kind of mud on their legs and they got to deal with something every single day. And so we got a team that can deal with it, take the punches, keep getting back up, and manage folks. We have 500 people now around the globe. The other interesting thing about this business now, keep that question. What interesting thing about our business is it's a religion. It's a cult. It's a healthy cult. There's no negative to the brand. There's nothing we're promoting or doing that's not healthy. but it's definitely a cult. If you look at the data in the right, religions are falling off a bit, certain religions, and people are still looking for that community, and they want to get together, and this is one of those healthy places to gather. So so when they get very passionate in either direction about our church.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's something really fundamental about that, about people coming together in groups to move. There's a really interesting book by Barbara Ehrenreich called Dancing in the Streets, and it's a history of human movement. And something I read in that book has fascinated me for a long time. And I would love to get her on the podcast and talk to her about it. But she talks about why do humans dance, right? That's kind of an interesting question. Why do we, and like there's artistic expression, but her hypothesis is that maybe the evolutionary function of dance is that humans used to gather around fires, which anybody who's spent time in the wilderness, that you want to be around a fire when if you're not around the fires, you might not survive, right? So if anybody hasn't had that experience, it's a very primitive experience, and once you have it, you never forget it. But her hypothesis was that humans would dance around a fire because they could cast shadows that were larger than themselves into the wilderness. So they actually would look like a monster to any predators that might be hunting them. And, there's something about people coming together in groups to do physical activities that's just fundamental to our human nature. And if people don't get out and do that, they're not getting to experience that. And there is something very transformative about that crucible of effort and facing something challenging together, which is, what you're facilitating. So that definitely makes a ton of sense.
There's nothing. I tell everybody around the world, and by the way, I give away free entries, so it's not a sales pitch. Like, if you're a regular person, like you said, that has not experienced a fire in the wilderness or not done something so hard where the wheels are falling off and you're questioning who you are, you come out and do one of our events, you are changed. Book doesn't do it, a podcast doesn't do it, a movie doesn't do it. You got to come out, you got to suffer, and it will change you. It'll change you. Change doesn't happen unless it's under pressure. You got to put yourself under pressure.
And Joe, when you think about where where you've taken the business to the point it is now, having gotten through the pandemic, having survived that crucible, is there some more maximum version of this that you want to do? Is there an even bigger vision that you have for what you would like to have happen with your business empire?
There is a big vision that I have that people just don't understand. Why are you getting into paddleboarding? Why mountain biking? I I don't know what's going to tickle that person, what discipline. And the goal, the vision is to change 100 million lives. So every decision we make has to drive the change of 100 million lives. And maybe we could do it with obstacle racing, but maybe somebody gets off the couch because they want to go mountain biking. Maybe somebody gets off the couch because they want to go to Hawaii and do the toughest paddleboard race in the world. Like, so we have to be multidisciplinary in my mind to attract humans to take a chance and suffer a bit and hopefully spark that interest in the things you and I found. And so how do we continue to expand those offerings? Like, think about LVMH, Louis Vuitton is a house of brands. We want to be the house of hard. If it's hard, if it's challenging, if it's legit, we want it to be in our house. And then imagine being able to buy a season pass that allows you to do all this stuff. The same way Vail sells a pass and you can go ski any one of their resorts. That's the vision.
During the time that you've had the business, technology has changed so much, and it's enabled so much for people around the world to connect with each other, to develop, to access more information. It's also, obviously, it's totally divided people, and people spend more time with screens now than human beings typically. Has that changed anything about who shows up or how you get people into the funnel and out to the start line?
We were putting on events before social media existed, and it was very, very hard to convince people. Once you can showcase somebody dirty, crawling through barbed wire, doing these crazy things, it actually became easier to attract the masses. So social media has done wonders in that regard. The downside is when you and I go to a park or we check out a sidewalk as we're driving, there's nobody on them. Neighborhoods or kids aren't outside because I have 4 children and my kids have grown up in Spartan, in insanity, right? I'm a crazy person. And last night I had to tell Charlie, my second son, put the phone down as I'm looking at my phone, right?
Right.
So it's look, the largest, most well capitalized companies in the world are connected to that device. That is the most addictive thing on the planet. We had our kids, we do a death camp every summer on our farm in Vermont. A couple of weeks long. We just absolutely torture kids. It's like going to budge training. And I was feeling like, you know what, the kids worked really hard. I think they might have done 1,000 burpees that day, carried rocks up the mountain. They were up at 5 a.m. in ice cold water. I said, let's give the kids ice cream. It's against my religion, but we'll give them ice cream. And I put their phones out, and I was not attempting to create an experiment by any means. And I put their phones out. It was not an experiment. And the kids went for their phones. They did not go for the ice cream. The ice cream melted. And I realized at that moment, these devices are probably the most addictive thing on the planet. So on the one hand, the device is allowing us to grow our business and get people outside. But on the other hand, it's keeping people off the sidewalks and not going outside, right? And it's doing more damage than it's helping for sure. Because you and I, when I grew up anyway, you didn't really need Spartan race. It was a Spartan race every day. My parents had to scream to get me back inside. They had to find us because we didn't have this. We didn't have these devices that we could look at and get all this dopamine and all these chemicals just by doing nothing. We had to go find things to do. We had to find girls. We had to read a map, find a quarter, go to a payphone. You don't have to do anything anymore.
Yeah. I often think about the experience of just calling someone on the phone and you're calling a family and like the mom or dad's answer. You know what I mean? Just imagining a human today going through that experience of calling a landline where whatever, some indeterminate number of people might pick up the phone. They might be listening to you. It's a very different world that we live in today, obviously. And as you noted, it's enabled a lot of great things. And then it's also brought with it a lot of challenges. Joe, when you think about, we've talked a lot about the different physical activities and races that you've been involved in. Is there anything left that you want to go do that you haven't tried yet?
The one thing I have on my mind there's 2 things I'd love to do before I leave this planet. I would like to row across the Atlantic, and I would like to walk the entire Great Wall. I'd like to get those 2 things done.
When's it going to happen?
I'm making excuses with this answer, but I'd like all the kids to go off to college. I'd like to have somebody else as CEO of this company, and I'll be chairman. And then, like you and I said earlier, then I can go have fun.
Right.
And I can go have fun. Because those things would be fun, right? Somebody listening is saying, oh my God, that sounds crazy. That'd be fun.
Coming soon. Awesome. Well, Joe, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you making the time, and thanks for sharing your story. It's been awesome.
Thanks for having me. We got to have you on my podcast next.
I'd love to. That'd be great.
Yeah, shoot me an email on that, joe@spartan.com. Oh, also, anybody that follows you, listens to you, whatever, they're racing on me, no charge. So just collect a bunch of names. Maybe you come out to one of our events or whatever. And You're in Maine. Why don't you plan on coming to Fenway?
Okay.
How far how far is Fenway from your house?
I have no idea,
All right, well, look it up.
but I
Fenway,
could find out.
Boston. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be there. You're gonna be there. We're gonna round up a crew of your listeners, and 3 mile. We'll have some fun.
Okay. That sounds awesome, Joe. I'd love it.
If you
Okay,
round up a
man.
big enough crew,
All right.
I might get a rowboat that you and your team can carry through the whole race.
That sounds terrible in the best way possible. So, all right, we got a deal. That sounds good. Please help more people find this podcast. To do that, just hit subscribe and rate the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and share this episode with a friend. Go to choosethehardway.com to sign up for the newsletter, and if there's someone you think would make a great guest, DM @HardwayPod. Choose the Hard Way is a big truck production. Anthony Palmer at Palm Tree Podco is the producer and editor, and Emily Miles is head of digital and marketing. Heckler Projects founder Jeffrey Nebellini is the world-renowned and extremely talented designer behind our brand identity and the striking Choose the Hard Way logo. The content for this show is created by me, Andrew Vance.